The highway stretched endlessly under the night sky, a ribbon of cracked asphalt glowing faintly beneath the headlights of Sarah's pickup truck. It was close to midnight, and most of the towns along this stretch of road had gone quiet. Lights out, diners closed, windows dark. Only the occasional gas station stayed open, its buzzing fluorescent signs breaking the monotony of the drive. Sarah Carter's hands gripped the wheel loosely, her posture relaxed but her eyes sharp, scanning the road as if it were second nature. She had been driving for hours, her duffel bag and gear tossed into the passenger seat. To anyone who saw her, she looked like an ordinary traveler. Dark hair tied back into a no-nonsense ponytail, jeans and a simple jacket, no makeup, no jewelry. But the way she carried herself told a different story. Even when seated, her back was straight, her shoulders squared, her gaze steady. She wasn't a lost drifter. She wasn't fragile. She wasn't prey. She was a Navy SEAL. But that wasn't something she advertised. When the low glow of a gas station sign appeared ahead, Sarah flicked her blinker and pulled off the highway. The station sat alone at the edge of town, its neon open sign flickering like it was on its last breath. A couple of old pickups were parked near the convenience store entrance, their drivers inside buying snacks. Otherwise, the place looked deserted. Sarah eased her truck next to the pump, cut the engine, and stepped out. The night air was cool, carrying the faint smell of gasoline and dust. She stretched once, shaking the stiffness from her legs, then swiped her card and began fueling. The hiss of the pump filled the quiet. Sarah glanced around out of habit. The station's floodlights created deep shadows around the lot. The night felt still, almost too still, but she let the thought pass. She was used to silence after long stretches of road. Inside the store, the clerk leaned against the counter, bored, eyes fixed on his phone. A couple of teens loitered near the chip aisle, laughing quietly about something only they found funny. They glanced out at Sarah once, but quickly went back to their jokes. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Sarah leaned against her truck, her eyes tilted up toward the night sky. Stars stretched wide above her, distant and cold, a reminder of how small one could feel out here on the road. She breathed in slowly, letting the calm settle over her. It was moments like this she valued most since leaving deployment. Quiet, ordinary, almost forgettable. But deep down, she knew quiet never lasted. The sound came suddenly, low, distant at first, then swelling into a growl that vibrated through the ground. Sarah's ears sharpened before her eyes did. She turned her head toward the highway. Engines, not one, not two, many. Moments later, headlights appeared on the road, weaving together into a river of harsh light. The roar of motorcycles grew louder until it drowned out the pump's steady hiss. Sarah's eyes narrowed. She didn't move, didn't shift her posture, but her senses sharpened like a blade. The bikes rolled off the highway and into the lot, tires crunching gravel. They came in fast, reckless, engines snarling like beasts in the night. There were at least 10 of them, leather vests glinting under the station's harsh lights, patches stitched onto their backs, outlaw bikers. The ground seemed to shake as they pulled into a loose circle near the pumps, engines still revving, laughter echoing into the night. The station clerk peeked out the window, his face paling. The teens in the aisle froze, exchanging nervous glances. They knew better than to linger. Sarah didn't flinch. She simply shifted her gaze back to the pump, her face calm, her breathing steady. To anyone watching, she looked indifferent, like she hadn't noticed the sudden flood of noise and testosterone filling the lot. But inside, every muscle was ready, coiled like a spring. The bikers dismounted, boots hitting gravel with heavy thuds. They spread out like predators staking a claim, their laughter sharp and mean. One pointed toward Sarah, elbowing the man next to him. "Look at this," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the lot. "All alone, middle of the night. What do we have here?" Another chuckled, his grin wide beneath his scruffy beard. "Little lady filling her tank. Hope she ain't scared." Their laughter followed, crude and mocking. Sarah calmly clicked the pump off, slid it back into place, and screwed the cap onto her tank. She didn't look at them, didn't respond. To them, she appeared uninterested, maybe even intimidated. But in reality, she was measuring them, one by one, cataloging their size, their stances, the way they moved. They thought they'd found easy prey. They couldn't have been more wrong. Inside the store, the clerk muttered nervously to himself. Poor girl's about to get eaten alive. The teens pressed against the glass, torn between fear and curiosity. Sarah adjusted her jacket, her eyes finally flicking toward the gang. She didn't glare, didn't smile, didn't reveal anything, but there was something in her gaze, something steady, cold, unflinching. That made the laughter falter for just a second. She opened her truck door, slid into the driver's seat, and shut it softly. The bikers grinned, emboldened again. To them, her silence meant fear. They had no idea that silence was her weapon, that patience was her shield. The night was no longer ordinary. The gas station had become a stage, and the outlaws had chosen the wrong opponent, and soon they would discover exactly how wrong. The gas station lot had never felt so small. Engines growled and headlights swept across the cracked pavement as the outlaw bikers fanned out, taking up every corner. Their machines gleamed with chrome, patched leather vests catching the harsh glare of the overhead floodlights. The ground vibrated under the weight of their presence. The quiet night now split open by noise and arrogance. Inside the store, the clerk shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the security cameras and the window. The two teens by the snacks froze in place, whispering nervously. They had seen rough men before, but not like this. This was a pack, a hunting pack, and their attention was already fixed on one target. Sarah sat behind the wheel of her pickup, the engine still off, her hands loose on her lap. She didn't fidget, didn't drum her fingers, didn't show any sign of nerves, but her eyes, hidden beneath the shadow of her brow, tracked every movement outside. The bikers were loud, crude, but she wasn't listening to their words. She was listening to their rhythm, the cadence of their boots, the pauses in their laughter, the subtle tells of men who thought they owned every inch of space they walked into. One of them, tall and lanky with tattoos crawling up his neck, swaggered closer to her truck. He rapped his knuckles on the hood. "Nice ride," he called out, his voice thick with sarcasm. "Shame it don't fit the driver." His buddies howled with laughter. Sarah didn't move. Another biker, heavier, with a scraggly beard and a beer belly straining against his vest, stepped up to the driver's side window. He leaned in, his face inches from the glass. "Hey, sweetheart," he drawled. "You lost or something? Maybe you need real men to point you in the right direction." He smirked, fogging the glass with his breath. Sarah's expression didn't change. She reached slowly for the ignition key, twisted it, and the truck rumbled to life. Her calmness irritated him. He slapped the side of the door with a loud bang, making the teens inside the store jump. "You ignoring me?" he barked, his voice rising. A third biker joined in, circling behind the truck. He whistled mockingly. "Come on, boys, don't scare her. She's delicate. Look at those little hands on the wheel." He mimed a driving motion, pretending to be her. The group roared with laughter. Sarah's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, watching his position without turning her head. She adjusted her grip slightly, not out of fear but calculation. The leader finally stepped forward. He was broad-shouldered, his shaved head glistening under the lights, a jagged scar running down his cheek. The others made way for him instinctively. His presence carried weight not because of honor but because of fear. He walked up to the driver's side, leaned an elbow casually on the door, and peered in. His grin was wide, full of menace. "You know what I think, boys," he said loudly, making sure everyone heard. "I think she's scared stiff. Look at her, sitting there like a little rabbit, ain't even saying a word." More laughter followed. Sarah finally turned her head toward him. Her gaze met his. For a heartbeat, he faltered. There was nothing meek in those eyes. No tremble, no plea, just calm steel. But he covered his hesitation with a laugh louder than the rest. "Oh, she's got eyes, all right. Look at that glare. Thinks she's tough?" He leaned closer, voice dropping so only she could hear. "Don't worry, darling. We'll break that soon enough." Sarah exhaled slowly, her face betraying nothing. Inside, her body was coiled like a spring. Every insult, every shove of their presence into her space was another line crossed. She had trained for worse. She had stared down men twice their size, twice their cruelty in deserts and jungles far from here. These bikers didn't know it yet, but their bravado was writing checks their bodies couldn't cash. Still, she stayed still, waiting, measuring, letting them believe. Inside the store, the clerk whispered to the teens, she should just drive away. No sense in poking the bear. But none of them noticed Sarah's foot hadn't pressed the gas. She wasn't running, she was preparing. The bikers, emboldened by her silence, grew louder. One swung his leg over her bumper, sitting on it as if to claim the truck. Another grabbed the gas pump nozzle, pretending to spray it at her window, laughing when the clerk inside shouted, "Hey, knock it off." The leader straightened, looking around at his crew. "What do you say, boys? Should we teach her a little respect?" Cheers erupted. Boots stomped. Chains rattled. Sarah's hand tightened on the wheel, her jaw flexing once. For the first time, her lips parted. Her voice came calm, controlled and cold. "Last warning," she said. The laughter died just enough for the words to hang in the air. The leader blinked, then grinned wider, mistaking it for a bluff. "You hear that? She thinks she's in charge." The men laughed again, but it sounded thinner now, less certain. Something in her tone unsettled them. Sarah's gaze moved across the lot, marking exits, weapons, distances. In her mind, the scene shifted from harassment to battlefield. Each outlaw became a variable, each movement another calculation. Her SEAL training was second nature, guiding her thoughts without effort. The stage was set. The bikers thought they were predators circling prey. But Sarah was no rabbit. She was the storm waiting to break. The gas station lot vibrated with the outlaw bikers' noise, their jeers echoing off the concrete walls. For a moment it looked like their antics might end with mocking words and crude laughter. But gangs like this didn't know when to stop. And Sarah could sense it. The tipping point was coming. The leader circled the driver's side door again, dragging his knuckles along the paint. The sound grated against the quiet night, his grin widening with each screech. "Nice truck, sweetheart," he taunted. "Would be a shame if something happened to it." His crew roared with laughter, emboldened. One of them yanked open her gas tank flap again, jabbing a dirty finger inside. "Hey boss, maybe we siphon her tank dry, huh? Let's see how far she gets then." Another pounded a fist against her tailgate, the thud rattling the glass. "Come on, girl, say something. Don't just sit there. Where's that attitude?" Sarah sat still, her eyes calm, her hands resting on the wheel. To anyone watching, she looked frozen, passive. But beneath her stillness, her mind worked at lightning speed. She measured the men's stances, the rhythm of their boots on gravel, the way their laughter spiked and fell like waves. She tracked exits, sightlines, improvised tools in reach. The leader leaned closer, his breath hot against her window. "What's the matter, darling? Cat got your tongue?" He smirked and tapped his knife, small but sharp, against the glass. Clink, clink, clink. The teens inside the store gasped. "He's gonna hurt her," one whispered, their faces pale behind the glass. But Sarah didn't flinch. Her pulse stayed steady, her breathing controlled. Years of training had taught her that fear gave enemies power. Calm stripped it away. The men grew restless. Their fun with words no longer satisfied. The lanky biker with neck tattoos yanked at her door handle. "Locked, huh?" He laughed, yanking harder. "What, you think this tin can's gonna save you?" The others gathered closer, slapping the hood, banging fists on the roof. The truck rocked slightly under their weight. One climbed onto the bed, stomping like it was a stage. Another spit across her windshield, his saliva dripping down in the glare of the floodlights. The leader straightened, spreading his arms as if conducting an orchestra. "Listen to her silence, boys. That's fear. That's what it sounds like when they know they're not in control." More laughter followed, though thinner this time. The bravado was high, but Sarah's stillness unsettled some of them. They thrived on panic. Panic fed them. But this woman's calm, cold, unshaken, was like a void they couldn't fill. The bearded biker with the beer belly took things further. He reached for the door handle again, yanking violently. "Let's get her out and show her how we welcome strangers." Sarah's hand shifted slightly, her fingers brushing the inside of the door. Still calm, still patient, the leader grinned, nodding. "Do it." The biker pulled harder. Sarah unlocked the door. The click was faint but loud enough. The biker's eyes widened with surprise. Well, well, she's inviting me in now." He yanked the door open. And for the first time, Sarah moved. Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist like steel. His smirk dissolved into a choked gasp as her thumb pressed into the nerve cluster just below his palm. His knees buckled, his body folding like a puppet with its strings cut. The gang froze. Sarah released him just as fast, letting him stumble backward, clutching his arm. She shut the door again with a deliberate push. Her face remained calm, her eyes unblinking. Inside the store, the clerk whispered in awe, "What the hell was that?" The biker's laughter faltered, replaced by confusion and tension. For the first time, the script didn't follow their rules. The leader sneered, covering his unease with louder bravado. "She thinks she's clever, boys. Thinks she's got tricks. Let's remind her whose lot this is. He nodded toward the biker on the bed of her truck. The man stomped harder, denting the metal with his boots. Yeah, this is ours now, he shouted. Sarah's gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, her eyes locking on him. She didn't move. She didn't need to. The man's grin faltered as if her silence burned through him. The leader slammed a fist on her window, his voice rising. You're gonna regret not showing us respect. Sarah finally spoke again, her voice low, measured, but carrying enough weight to silence every man in earshot. Last chance. The words cut sharper than any blade. Not shouted. Not begged. Just stated like fact. The bikers exchanged uneasy looks. They had heard threats before, shouted, bluffed, desperate. This was none of those. This was a promise. The leader's jaw clenched. He spat onto the ground and growled, "You don't scare us." Sarah's gaze held his. Calm. Deadly. Inside the store, the teens pressed against the glass, their hearts racing. The clerk muttered under his breath, "They picked the wrong one." God help 'em, they picked the wrong one. The laughter came back, forced and hollow. The bikers, unwilling to admit their nerves, shouted louder, pounding on the truck again. The leader waved his hand, signaling them forward. "Get her out," he barked. Boots moved. Chains rattled. Hands reached. Sarah's grip tightened on the wheel once more, her body shifting ever so slightly. Her muscles coiled. Her breath slowed. The predators had crossed the line, and in the next heartbeat, they would learn the truth. They weren't mocking prey anymore. They were provoking a Navy SEAL. The gas station lot quaked under the noise of outlaw laughter, fists pounding against metal, boots thudding against the truck bed. The bikers had crossed every line. They had mocked, threatened, and now physically surrounded her. For minutes, Sarah had endured their noise and bravado in silence. But now, the line they couldn't see had been crossed. The leader slammed his palm against the driver's side window again, leaning close enough for his breath to fog the glass. "Out of the truck, sweetheart," he growled, his scarred face twisted into a grin. "Playtime's over." The rest cheered, stomping, egging each other on. One rattled a chain, another whistled mockingly, and a third spat onto the hood. The air stank of gasoline, sweat, and arrogance. Inside the store, the clerk whispered, "She's done for." The two teens beside him leaned closer to the glass, wide-eyed, unable to look away. But Sarah wasn't done for. She was done waiting. Her hand left the wheel. Calm, precise, she shut off the ignition. The truck went silent, the headlights dimming, leaving only the harsh glow of the overhead lamps across her face. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for the door handle. The bikers howled with triumph. "Yeah, there we go," one shouted. Knew she'd fold? The leader stepped back, his arms spread like a ringmaster welcoming his star act. "Come on, boys. Let's show her what happens when you mouth off to the wrong crew." The door clicked open. Sarah stepped out. She didn't slam the door or rush. She moved with deliberate calm, planting her boots on the gravel, standing tall. At just over 5.5 feet, she wasn't the tallest figure in the lot, nor the bulkiest. But the way she stood, shoulders squared, head high, posture unshaken, made her presence larger than any of them. Her jacket shifted in the night breeze, her eyes scanning the circle of leather and steel around her. Each outlaw grinned, expecting fear, expecting shaking knees and begging words. Instead, they were met with silence, a silence so sharp it cut through their laughter. Sarah's gaze locked on the leader. "Back off!" Her voice was calm, almost quiet. But it carried a weight that made a few men stop mid-laugh. The leader barked out a forced chuckle, trying to mask his unease. "You hear that, boys? She thinks she's got a say in this." He stepped closer, puffing his chest. "Lady, you don't tell us what to do. You do what we say." Sarah didn't blink. "That was your warning." A ripple of uncertainty passed through the group. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She wasn't crying, wasn't pleading. She was commanding. Some of them glanced at each other, unsettled, but pride forced their mouths back into smirks. The heavy-set biker from before spat at her feet. "What are you gonna do, huh? Slap us?" Sarah tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "Touch me," she said, her tone razor-sharp, "and you'll regret it before you hit the ground." The teens inside the store sucked in their breath. Even the clerk, hardened by years of late-night troublemakers, whispered, "She ain't bluffin'." The leader tried to smother the unease with louder bravado. He waved his hand, barking, "Grab her already." One of the bikers lunged forward, reaching for Sarah's arm. She didn't step back. She didn't flinch. Arm. She didn't step back. She didn't flinch. Instead, her hand shot up with lightning speed, catching his wrist mid-air. Her grip was iron. His grin faltered. In one sharp motion, she twisted, forcing his knees to buckle. He hit the ground with a grunt, his chain clattering beside him. The others froze. Sarah released him and straightened again, her stance unbroken. She swept her gaze across the circle. "That's one," she said evenly. "You want to be two?" The yard went still. The silence stretched, broken only by the hiss of a nearby pump and the faint chirp of crickets at the edge of the lot. The bikers, so used to being predators, suddenly found themselves staring at something they didn't understand. This woman wasn't prey. She wasn't even rattled. The leader snarled, masking his hesitation. "Don't just stand there. Get her." The circle tightened again, but their movements weren't as sure as before. Their boots scraped more than stomped, their laughter hollow now. Sarah's hands stayed loose at her sides, her breathing controlled. Every nerve in her body was awake, every muscle ready. She wasn't panicked. She was prepared. She gave them one last chance, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is over. Walk away and you leave standing. Stay and you don't." The teens pressed harder against the glass, whispering frantically. "She's insane." "No," the clerk corrected, his eyes wide with something like awe. "She's a soldier. I've seen that look before." But outside, the bikers laughed again, more desperate this time. Pride wouldn't let them walk away. The leader spat on the gravel and growled, "She's bluffing. Make her pay." Boots shifted closer. Chains rattled. Knuckles cracked. Sarah's gaze swept the circle one final time, her body steady, her will unshaken. They thought they had her cornered, but Sarah wasn't cornered. She was drawing them in. The storm had been called, and the next strike would be hers. The night air was thick with tension. The outlaw bikers had crowded closer, circling Sarah like wolves, their laughter forced now, their bravado beginning to crack. To anyone watching, she looked outnumbered and trapped, a lone woman facing a wall of leather and steel. But Sarah wasn't trapped. She was waiting. The leader sneered, spitting on the gravel. "You had your chance to play nice, sweetheart. Now you're ours." His words lit a fuse among his men. One with a jagged scar across his lip swung a chain menacingly, the links clinking as he advanced. Another cracked his knuckles, eyes hungry for the fight. Their boots stomped against the pavement, their shadows stretching long under the buzzing floodlights. Inside the store, the teens clutched each other's arms. "She's dead," one whispered. The clerk shook his head slowly, though his voice was hushed with awe. "No, look at her. She's not scared. They weren't wrong." Sarah's breathing was slow, her muscles loose, her eyes locked not on the noise but on the subtle movements. The twitch of a shoulder before a strike, the shift of weight before a lunge. She didn't see a gang. She saw openings. The scar-lipped biker lunged first, swinging the chain in a wide arc meant to intimidate. Sarah stepped forward instead of back, closing the distance in an instant. Her hand shot up, catching the chain mid-swing. Before he could react, she yanked it, pulling him off balance. Her boot snapped upward, connecting with his knee. A sickening crack split the air and he dropped, howling, the chain clattering to the pavement. The lot went silent for half a heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. Two more rushed her at once. One swung a fist, the other tried to grab her from behind. Sarah ducked under the punch, pivoted and slammed her elbow into the second man's ribs. The air rushed out of him in a wheeze. She caught the first attacker's wrist as he tried again, twisting until he dropped to his knees with a scream. The leader's grin faltered. "What the hell?" Sarah didn't give him time. She spun, using the first man's own momentum to throw him into the second, both of them crashing hard against the side of a motorcycle. The machine toppled with a crash, its alarm shrieking into the night. The bikers shouted curses, but their formation broke. Some surged forward, others hesitated, the confidence in their eyes shaken. The heavy-set biker from before roared and charged, his bulk thundering across the gravel. Sarah sidestepped at the last second, grabbed his vest and redirected his momentum. He slammed head-first into the pump post, bouncing back to the ground with a groan. Another swung a broken bottle, shards glinting in the fluorescent light. Sarah caught his wrist, twisted, and the glass fell harmlessly to the ground. She followed with a sharp palm strike to his chin. He dropped like a sack of bricks. From inside the store, the teens' mouths hung open. She's dropping them like nothing," one gasped. The clerk leaned on the counter, whispering, "That ain't no ordinary woman. That's training. Years of it." Outside, Sarah remained calm, her breathing even. She moved like water, flowing, efficient, no wasted energy. Every strike landed with precision. Every movement neutralized an attacker before the next could blink. The bikers, used to bar brawls and intimidation, suddenly found themselves in a fight they didn't understand. This wasn't flailing fists or wild swings. This was surgical. This was war. The leader barked orders, his voice cracking. "Don't just stand there. Take her down!" But hesitation spread like poison through his crew. Two men who had stepped forward froze as Sarah's gaze locked on them, her eyes cold, unflinching. One backed up, muttering, What the hell is she?" The leader snarled, grabbing a wrench from the saddlebag of his bike. He stormed toward her, brandishing it like a club. Sarah let him come. He swung, a wild, heavy arc meant to crush. She ducked under, stepped into his reach, and drove her fist into his gut. The air blasted out of him, his body folding. Before he could recover, she hooked his arm, flipped him onto the ground, and planted her boot on his chest. The wrench slipped from his hand. The entire yard froze. Sarah stood over him, her silhouette framed by the harsh lights. Her voice was steady, almost quiet, but it carried more weight than any shout. "Walk. Away." The bikers hesitated, glancing at each other, their fallen leader groaning beneath her boot. Their pride screamed at them to fight, but their instincts screamed louder. They had mocked her, surrounded her, tried to break her. Instead, she had broken them, swiftly, effortlessly. The leader coughed, wheezing, his eyes burning with humiliation. You don't know who you're messing with," he spat weakly. Sarah leaned closer, her eyes like steel. "No, you don't." She stepped back, letting him scramble to his feet. The silence was deafening, broken only by the shrill alarm of the toppled bike still wailing in the background. One by one, the outlaws pulled their fallen brothers up, their jeers replaced with muttered curses and shaken breaths. Inside the store, the clerk exhaled, whispering, "They picked the wrong one. God help 'em, they picked the wrong one." Sarah adjusted her jacket, her stance still calm, unshaken. To her, this wasn't about proving strength. It wasn't about ego. It was about control, showing them they weren't in it anymore. And for the first time that night, the outlaws realized it too. The gas station no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the woman they should never have mocked. The air stank of gasoline, rubber, and sweat. The shrill wail of the toppled motorcycle's alarm still pierced the night, bouncing off the gas station walls. The leader stumbled to his feet, clutching his stomach where Sarah's strike had dropped him. His men gathered close, rattled but not ready to accept defeat. "You idiots," he spat between ragged breaths. "She's just one woman." But the truth was already eating at them. Sarah stood calmly in the middle of their chaos, posture straight, jacket unruffled, her eyes cold as steel. She hadn't shouted once, hadn't wasted a single movement. Every strike she made landed with surgical precision. The bikers weren't fighting a woman at a gas station. They were fighting something far deadlier. One of them snarled, breaking the silence. He hefted a tire iron and charged, his boots pounding the pavement. Two others followed, swinging fists and shouting curses. Sarah stepped aside at the last second, catching the tire iron mid-swing. With a sharp twist, she disarmed him and used the momentum to slam the metal bar against his shoulder. He dropped with a howl. The next man lunged. Sarah dropped low, sweeping his legs out from under him. Gravel scraped his arms as he hit the ground. Before he could rise, she pinned him with the tire iron, pressing just enough to remind him who was in control. The third came at her with wild fists. Sarah pivoted smoothly, letting his momentum carry him past. She drove her elbow into his spine, sending him sprawling across the hood of her truck. The crowd of outlaws roared with fury, their circle breaking into chaos. Now they swarmed. Chains whistled through the air. A bottle shattered against the pavement, spraying glass shards. Boots thudded, curses flew, and the night became a storm of violence. Sarah moved through it like water. She ducked under a chain, grabbed the man's wrist, and yanked him into his own partner's swing. Both collapsed in a tangle of limbs. She spun, hurling the broken bottle's wielder into the trash bin. The clang echoed like a gong. Another tried to pin her against the gas pump, but she twisted free, yanking the hose loose. Gasoline sprayed across his vest, the sharp reek burning his nose. He stumbled back, gagging, as she dropped the nozzle and drove a boot into his chest. Every second she controlled the battlefield. Every object became a weapon in her hands. The gas pump, the gravel, even their own weight worked against them. Even their own weight worked against them. The engines of the retreating motorcycles faded into the distance, their red taillights swallowed by the black highway. The gas station fell eerily quiet, the night reclaiming its silence after the storm. The air was still thick with gasoline fumes and the sharp tang of sweat, but the danger had evaporated. All that remained were dented metal, scuffed gravel, and the faint groans of a few stragglers too slow to flee with the rest. Sarah stood in the center of the lot, her boots planted firmly on the ground. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Not once had her composure cracked. Not in the mocking, not in the chaos, not in the violence. She looked in that moment less like a survivor and more like a sentinel carved from stone. Inside the convenience store, the clerk and the two teens hadn't moved since the fight ended. They pressed against the glass, staring in awe at the woman who had just dismantled a biker gang with nothing but her hands, her focus, and her will. The clerk broke the silence first, whispering as if he were afraid to be overheard. That's military. Has to be." The taller teen's eyes were wide, reflecting both fear and admiration. "Not just military," he muttered. "She moved like one of those special ops soldiers you see in the movies." The clerk's lips pressed into a thin line. "I think you're right." Sarah turned, finally acknowledging the onlookers behind the glass. For a long moment, her gaze lingered on them. They didn't see anger in her eyes. They didn't even see exhaustion. They saw something colder, something sharper. The same gaze a soldier wears on a battlefield. The gaze of someone who calculates survival like second nature. She started toward the truck, her boots crunching softly against the gravel. That's when a low groan stopped her. The leader. He was still on the ground, blood at the corner of his mouth, his scarred face twisted in rage. He dragged himself upright, clutching his side where her strike had knocked the wind out of him. His eyes burned as he spat in the dirt. "You think this is over?" he rasped, his voice low but laced with venom. "You don't know who we are. You don't know what we'll do." Sarah turned back to him, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. Slowly, she stepped closer until her boots stopped inches from where he knelt. She looked down at him the way a predator sizes up prey. "You're right," she said evenly. "I don't care who you are." The leader's glare faltered for the first time, her voice cut sharper. "But you should have cared who I am." He blinked, confused, pride fighting against the chill that crawled up his spine. "And who the hell are you?" he spat. Sarah's lips parted in the faintest hint of a smile, not arrogance, certainty. "Navy SEAL." The word struck harder than any blow she'd landed that night. The clerk inside the store dropped his coffee mug, ceramic shattering against tile. The teens gasped in unison, their hands flying to their mouths. The leader froze, his bravado disintegrating in an instant. His men, scattered and bruised, stopped where they were. Silence stretched across the lot, heavy and undeniable. Navy SEAL. The truth hit them like a hammer. They hadn't mocked a random traveler or some quiet stranger. They had mocked the wrong soldier, the kind of warrior trained to survive wars most men couldn't even imagine. Sarah crouched slightly, her eyes locked on his. "Next time you think about surrounding someone weaker than you, remember this. You don't know what battles they fought. You don't know what they're capable of." She leaned closer, her words cutting like glass. "And you don't know if the woman you're mocking has killed men far worse than you in places you can't even point to on a map." The leader's face drained of color. His lips parted, but no words came out. Sarah straightened, giving him one last look before turning away. She walked back to her truck, her pace steady, her movements deliberate. She opened the driver's door and slid in as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The silence inside the store shattered into whispers. "She's a SEAL." "Holy hell, she's a SEAL," the shorter teen repeated over and over, his voice cracking. The clerk ran a hand down his face. "They picked the wrong one. God almighty, they picked the wrong one." Even as Sarah started her truck, the awe hung thick in the air. This wasn't just another bar fight, or another late-night scrap at a gas station. This was something the town would talk about for years. The leader staggered toward his bike, his pride in tatters. He barked half-heartedly at his men, his voice broken and hollow. Let's go." Engines coughed to life again, but this time there was no roar of dominance, no mocking laughter, just silence and shame as they limped out of the lot. Sarah watched them leave through the rearview mirror, her face still calm. Only when the last tail light disappeared into the dark did she exhale, her grip on the wheel loosening slightly. For her, it wasn't about glory or recognition. It wasn't even about winning. It was about control, about reminding them and herself that discipline outlasts chaos. As she pulled onto the highway again, the night swallowed her truck, the glow of her taillights shrinking until the gas station looked abandoned once more. But it wasn't forgotten. The legend had already taken root. By morning, whispers would spread. By the end of the week, the story would ripple through truck stops, diners, and bars. The tale of outlaw bikers who mocked the wrong woman at a lonely gas station and discovered too late that she was a Navy SEAL. And Sarah? She drove on, silent, steady, leaving behind only the lesson she had carved into their bones. The highway swallowed Sarah's truck as if it had never been there. The steady hum of her engine faded into the night, leaving the gas station bathed in buzzing fluorescent lights and uneasy silence. Yet for the clerk and the two teens who had watched the chaos unfold, silence didn't mean peace. Their hearts were still pounding, their minds struggling to grasp what they had just seen. The clerk let out a shaky breath, rubbing his temples. His spilled coffee still stained the counter, forgotten in the shock. "I've worked here 20 years, he muttered, voice trembling. "Seen drunks, thieves, junkies. But that," he shook his head, his eyes wide. "That was something else." The shorter teen finally spoke, his voice thin and awestruck. "She said she's a Navy SEAL, a SEAL." The taller one, still pale, nodded slowly. "Explains everything. Did you see how she moved? Like she knew what they were going to do before they did it, like a machine." "No," the clerk said, his voice firmer now. "Not a machine. A soldier. That was training. Real training. Those boys never stood a chance. Outside, the gravel lot still bore the marks of the fight. Shattered glass glittering like stars on the pavement. Dents in the hood of Sarah's truck where fists had slammed down. A dark stain of gasoline near the pumps. The air still carried the echo of chains rattling, engines roaring, and the sudden brutal silence when the gang realized who they had crossed. By morning, those marks would fade, cleaned up or forgotten. But the memory would not. The clerk locked up early, too shaken to carry on. He sat with the boys on the curb outside, the neon sign above them flickering. None of them spoke for a while. The night felt heavier now, as if the ground itself remembered. Finally, the taller teen broke the silence. "You think she's done that before?" The clerk gave him a sideways look. "Son, you don't move like that unless you've done it 100 times. Maybe 1,000, the younger boy frowned. Then why's she out here, alone? At a gas station in the middle of nowhere? The clerk stared out at the dark highway, his voice low. Maybe she just wanted peace. Soldiers like that, they don't brag. They don't ask for thanks, they just move on. And move on she did. Sarah's truck rolled through the night, headlights cutting across the empty highway. Her face was calm, her grip steady on the wheel. She didn't replay the fight in her mind, there was no need. For her it had been another mission, no different than countless others she'd carried out in deserts, jungles, and mountains far from home. Except this time, the battlefield was a gas station. The enemy wasn't soldiers with rifles, but outlaws with chains and bravado. The mission wasn't about strategy or orders. It was simple: survive, control, protect herself. Still, she knew the story would spread. It always did. And she didn't mind, let it. Maybe it would serve as a warning. Maybe the next group of loud-mouthed predators would think twice before targeting someone who looked small, alone, or vulnerable. Because looks deceived. She was proof. By dawn, word had already begun to ripple outward. The clerk told the story to his wife over breakfast, his hands still trembling as he gestured wildly. The teens told their friends at school, their voices climbing higher with each retelling. "She dropped them like nothing," one said. "She caught a chain midair," the other added. Within hours, the tale reached the diner on Main Street, then the truckers who stopped for coffee, then the farmers who loaded up on supplies. By nightfall, the legend was already forming: the wrong bikers, the wrong gas station, the wrong woman, and the punchline every time: she was a Navy SEAL. Back on the highway, Sarah drove with the same quiet focus she always carried. She didn't need the recognition, didn't crave the awe. That wasn't why she fought. Her service had taught her a truth most people never realized. Strength wasn't about showing off. It was about standing when others tried to break you. It was about knowing when to act and when to walk away. At the gas station, she had given those bikers every chance to walk away. They chose pride. She chose precision. Now the highway stretched ahead, endless and quiet. And she welcomed the quiet, endless and quiet. And she welcomed the quiet. The legend would grow without her help. The bikers would never live it down. For years, they'd be remembered not for their dominance, but for their humiliation, the night they mocked a lone woman and discovered, too late, she was deadlier than they could have imagined. Sarah, though, would never tell the story herself. She didn't need to. The gas station clerk, the teens, the outlaws, they would carry it for her. And somewhere, down the road, in another small town under another buzzing neon sign, Sarah would step out of her truck, buy a coffee, and disappear again into the night. Because she wasn't chasing legend, she was chasing peace.